Hello everyone and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy and today I'll be showing you how to make the Boo ornament. This adorable ghost pattern was designed by Sherry and we're very excited to be bringing it to you just in time for Halloween. Before we go any further with the video, make sure you check the link down below to get your free printable supply list to help you gather all of your tools and materials. In order to complete this pattern, you'll need a soft foam disc, about 125 satin straight pins, white fabric cut into 2 large squares and a few different strips. You'll need 6 small ovals cut out of black fabric. These measure about 3/8 of an inch wide by 5/8 of an inch long. To make these tiny ovals, I found it easiest to cut little rectangles that measured 3/8 of an inch by 5/8 of an inch, and then I used my fabric scissors to carefully trim away the corners to make these little oval shapes. And they don't all need to be perfect. They can be different and have different curves and edges there to add some character to your ghost. You'll also need a piece of trim, fabric scissors and pinking shears, a few embellishments including 4 tiny white glass head pins, a bead cap and a bead. For the arms of your ghost, you have a couple of different options. I happened to have these extra long corsage pins with pearls at the end handy. However, if you don't have long corsage pins available, you can use long looped pins from the Ornament Girls shop, and you can use a small pearl bead to glue on the end of that to get the same look as an extra long pearl head pin. You'll also need a few glue dots or a little bit of craft glue and a 10-inch piece of hanger string. Again, make sure to check out the link for your free printable supply list. This will give you all of the correct measurements and quantities for all of the materials you'll need for this pattern. Once all of your tools and materials are gathered, we can get started making your Boo ornament. I just want to say really quick before we get started that if you're using a long looped pin with a pearl bead for the arms of your ghost, go ahead and start out by gluing this pearl bead to the long looped pin. You want to do that for 2 of them and go ahead and set those aside to let them dry. For this tutorial, I have long corsage pins with a pearl head on top, so I won't be doing this step, but I just wanted to mention that this is an option and you can start out doing this to make sure your glue has time to set before you need these in the pattern. The first thing we're going to do is cover both sides of your disc with your white fabric, making up the face of your ghost. And if your fabric has a pattern side, you want to lay this down on your working surface with the pattern side facing away from you. Once you have this laying down with the non-pattern side facing up, you will center your disc on that square, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but you just want to make sure you have pretty much equal spacing on all sides. Now you're going to hold the disc and the fabric together and flip that over so that you can smooth it over the front of the disc. And we're going to pin it at the 4 corners, but you always want to keep your pins along the equator line. The equator is the faint line running around the center of your disc, dividing it into 2 halves. If you can't see it very well, you can always color that with a pen too, so that it's easier to see throughout your pattern. So I'm just going to make sure I still have this centered. Flip this over, and now when you smooth out one of the corners and you pin it in place, you want to make sure your pin is falling along that equator. So I just followed my equator over to pin down this first corner. Now I'm going directly across and I'm pulling on my fabric to smooth it out over the foam. We want it to lay as smooth as possible. You don't need to pull crazy hard because you can distort the pattern that you have on your fabric, but you want to pull tight enough that it's laying smooth. Again, follow your equator over and pin pretty much in line with the corner of the fabric. Do that for the remaining 2 corners. Always pinning along the equator, and if you realize any of your pins are way off of the equator, you can always adjust them once you notice that as well. Once all 4 corners are pinned, we're going to do the same thing for the sides. So I'm just smoothing this fabric over the foam, and when I pin it in between these 2 pins that are already here, I want to keep that along the equator. And once you pin, you can peel your fabric back to make sure your pin is right along that equator there. And I'm going to do the same thing, adding a pin on each of the remaining 3 sides. And from here on out, our goal is to just smooth this fabric over the foam to the best of our ability and keep adding pins all the way around. So I'm going to go around one time and add a pin between each of my existing pins. And as I'm doing that, I'm smoothing the fabric over the face of the foam. We don't want it to have a whole bunch of buckling because most of this is showing in your finished ornament. So you want it to be nice and smooth all the way across, and you're going to pin on the equator all the way around. And now I will go around one more time, really smoothing my fabric out, and this time I'm going to place about 2 or 3 pins in between each of my pins that are already there. And this is just going to give us a nice solid pin line, keeping this fabric nice and smooth all the way around the ornament. Once you have your fabric nice and smooth over the face of your disc and you have a solid pin line all the way around holding that in place, you can use your fabric scissors to carefully trim away the excess fabric right below your pins, and this should be pretty much right along the equator as well. And now that we have one side of our foam covered with nice smooth fabric, we're going to flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. So lay your second square of fabric with the pattern side facing away from you and center the bare side of your foam on top of that fabric. And now we're just going to do the exact same thing. I'm flipping that over, smoothing my fabric out over the foam. And now it's pretty easy to tell where the equator is because you can feel your pin line underneath there. So for side 2, you can just feel for those pins and keep your pins in line with the pins from side 1. And of course you're going to do all 4 corners, followed by all 4 sides, and then fill in between. And I'll probably skip this video ahead a little bit so you don't have to watch me do all of that a second time. But basically you're just going to keep pinning and smoothing like you did on the first side until your fabric is nice and secure all the way around the disc shape. Once that second piece of fabric is pinned down all the way around, you are once more going to use your fabric scissors to just trim away the excess all the way around the equator. And just like that, we've got our disc covered with fabric all the way around, and now we can start adding the fringe for the bottom of your Boo Ghost. For the bottom pieces of your ghost, you will need 5 1x7" strips of the same color white that you're using for your ghost. And we're going to use our pinking shears to give these some fun edges. So what you want to do is fold one of your strips in half, and if you have a patterned side, my fabric is the same on both sides, but if you have a patterned side, you want the patterned side facing out. So like the white side should be on the inside and your pattern should be facing out, and you're going to fold that in half so that it is now not 7 inches long, it is half that length and 1 inch wide. And you're going to use your pinking shears, and it just takes a little bit of time to keep your edges lined up as you're doing this. you're going to use your pinking shears to give this a nice zigzag edge, and you don't want to take off a ton of this strip. You aren't trying to make it way skinnier. You're just trying to turn the flat edge into a sawtooth edge to give it some pizzazz for your ornament. So on each long side, you're just going to keep your edges lined up and very carefully use your pinking shears to give us a nice fun edge to this piece. And this kind of makes a mess with all of these little pieces, but that's okay. And you can see I didn't quite catch the back piece of fabric there, so I'm just going to trim that one more time. And now at the bottom edge with 2 raw edges, not the top short folded edge, you want the other one with 2 raw edges. You're going to trim this. You can trim it straight across, you can trim it rounded. I'm going to trim mine to a little bit of a point there, still using your pinking shears. And now you can see that is how I trimmed my first strip of fabric. You're going to do this for all 5 strips. So you should have a total of 5 1x7" strips, and you're going to trim them all this same way. Of course, you don't need to get the point exactly perfect. You just want to fold them in half, trim the long edges, and then at the bottom raw edges, give yourself a point or a rounded edge down there as well. Once all 5 of your long strips are trimmed, we are ready to add them to your ghost. You're going to start with just one of these strips and make sure you crease that center fold so that when you unfold it, you can see the center crease running across the middle there. And that center crease, you're going to line right up with your pin line along the equator of the disc. And it doesn't matter where you start this. You can just pick anywhere on your disc. My center crease was right there and I lined it right up with the equator. You're going to pin this in place with 3 pins, again keeping those pins right along the equator as well. Now with your next strip, make sure that center fold is creased and you're going to unfold it, and just to the right of the piece we just placed, you're going to again align that fold with the equator and pin in place with 3 pins. Now do this one more time, adding a 3rd strip to the right of the 2 pieces that you just placed. So now you'll have 3 strips pinned along the equator. And since we're pinning them inside this fold here, when we lift up our ghost from the top, you won't be able to see those pins anymore, and we'll hide them with trim as well. So you can see now how those pieces hang down off the bottom, but we're gonna fill in these gaps here. So with your 4th strip, crease that center fold, unfold, and now this will be centered between and on top of your first 2 strips here. So the equator line is still lined up with the center crease, but you're laying this piece on top of those first 2 strips, centered in between them, and again, use 3 pins to hold it in place. And now we have just 1 strip left, and we're going to center it between the right 2 pieces, again on top of those bottom 2 pieces from the first set of 3 that we added. And once you lift your ghost up from the top, you can see that these wavy pieces at the bottom give him that adorable floating ghost look. Now we're going to add some trim to hide all of our pins. So you're going to flip these bottom pieces back open, and with your piece of trim, you're going to center it on the bottom, hidden inside of those pieces. And you can pin it in place with 2 pins, and you're keeping your trim centered on the equator. And my ghost has a little bit of silver shimmer to it, so I'm using this silver trim, but you could of course use white to help it blend right into the white fabric for your ghost. And once that end is pinned, you're just going to wrap it all the way around your disc, using it to cover up that equator, hiding all of your raw edges and pins. And when you return to where you started, you'll pin in place one more time and then trim that excess trim so that it's not sticking out. Once that is complete, we can add your ghost's arms. For the arms of your ghost, we are again going to use our pinking shears to trim up the edges. You should have 4 strips that are 7/8 of an inch wide. 2 of them are 4 inches long and 2 of them are 3.5. So we're gonna split those up. The 4-inch long pieces are gonna go on the inside and the 3.5-inch long pieces on the outside. And again, you're going to fold and trim these exactly like you did with the longer strips for the bottom of the ghost, folding them with the pattern side facing outward, trimming the long edges with your pinking shears to give them that cute zigzag edge without taking too much off, and then just round out the bottom or give yourself a little point there. Repeat that for the remaining 3 little strips of fabric. And once you've trimmed up those 4 strips, they're ready to add to your ghost. And again, you should have the 2 slightly longer pieces on the inside and the 2 slightly shorter pieces on the outside. And when you are ready to add the arms, you're going to use your long pin, either a long pin with a pearl glued on top, or I have a long corsage pin with a pearl head here. And you're going to weave from the outside to the inside. So for the left arm, I have my shorter piece on the left, and up here at the top folded edge, you just weave this pin in and out of your fabric. And you don't have to necessarily do it a certain number of times. You just want to make sure it's held on there all the way across the top, and then you'll pick right back up with the slightly longer piece for the end of the arm as well. And then you'll push your fabric down to the end with the pearl, and on your ghost, you're just going to center this on the side. So you can see this is the bottom, and I'm pinning right into the equator, not pushing in all the way, just pushing it in enough that it goes in, but it keeps the arms of your ghost sticking out. And now you're going to repeat that again for the right side, this side switching the side of your pearl and your long pieces. So the long piece is on the inside, the short piece is on the right, and I'm going to start weaving from the right side. And then add my second piece. And when you pin this second arm in place, you just want to make sure it's right across from that first arm that you placed, pinning it far enough in that it stays, but far enough out that your little arms are hanging down there. Now we can add your ghost's face. For the face on each side of your ornament, you'll need 3 of your tiny little black ovals. And for the mouth, you're going to need to glue that on. We don't want any pins on the mouth. So I have a couple of little glue dots here. I'm just ripping off a little piece of glue dot. You could also use fabric glue or craft glue. And I'm just gonna pick one of my ovals and glue it pretty much centered on my ghost there. Like I said, you could use any glue that'll hold your fabric. And now I'm going to lay the eyes on here in the position that I want them, but instead of gluing these eyes, I'm going to use my little white glass pearl head pins. And you can use these as sort of the pupils to show where your ghost is looking. So you can make him look off to the side, he can be cross-eyed, he can be looking upward, downward. You can play with the placement of these pins to give him a different expression. Now I'm gonna flip this over and just do the same thing on the back so that if your ghost is hanging, You can see his face from either side. And here's just an example of how placing those white pins in a different placement changes the expression of your ghost. Once we have added the face, there's just one more step, and that's to add a hanger to the top to hang your ornament. With a 10-inch piece of hanger string or ribbon, put the ends together and tie a knot. And now thread a pin with a bead of your choice followed by a bead cap. And then you will push this pin right through the knot on your hanger string. And if you want to trim off those little extra pieces of string, you can do that. And then this will get pinned right in the top center of your ghost to give you a nice way to hang it. And just like that, your boo ornament is finished. I love how quickly and easily this pattern comes together. You could make a whole bunch of little ghosts, each with their own personality. I hope you love using these to decorate for Halloween, and I can't wait to see how your ghosts turn out. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.